Welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show, where we celebrate, oh man, do we celebrate every single day the amazing people who are working so hard to make Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, listen, over the last few days, I've had the opportunity to meet some of the One Coast Award recipients, and man, do I enjoy those conversations. I really do. We're not only getting a chance to learn from them and celebrate their leadership, but we're able to be inspired by them because they're working so hard in their businesses, they're working so hard in the community, and they're setting an example for others. And I really have enjoyed that. If you haven't seen those or heard those conversations, you can go to the SuperTalk Gulf Coast Facebook page, or you can go to the Ricky Mathews Show Facebook page. Had a terrific conversation with Craig Ray, who's the former executive director for Visit Mississippi, Cedric Bradley from Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. What a terrific conversation that was, as we continue to have conversations about the perceptions about Mississippi versus the reality, and really good inspiration that comes from that. With that in mind, frankly, my recent conversation with T. McCovey and the work that the United Way of Jackson County is doing over in Jackson County in the wake of the tornadoes in Moss Point. And then, of course, my wonderful conversation with C.C. Shabazz, who I used to work with at the Sun Herald, now head of branding and creative for Memorial. I mean, I could just go on, but so many terrific conversations, and I appreciate you listening and looking for inspiring messages that come from all these conversations. This next conversation is one I'm really been looking forward to. In fact, Calvin Coleman, who's the president and CEO of Naomi Catering, and I have been trying to get our calendars in sync here for a while. But we're going to tell the story. We're going to tell his story, but we're going to tell the story of Naomi's Catering, a company that I have come in contact with in so many different ways, whether it's through my official capacity as the publisher of the Sun Herald back when I was at the Sun Herald, or whether it's attending a supper event that he catered, or any number of ways. We have crossed paths probably 1,000 times over the years. And without any further ado, let me welcome Chef Calvin Coleman, my friend Calvin, to the Ricky Mathews Show. How you doing, my friend?
I am doing great. Thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it very much.
It's great to have you. And you know what? This is the way it works. Okay, when I was the publisher of the Sun Herald, I was moving fast, and of course Katrina hits. We're all moving fast, yeah. So I didn't have the chance to really sit down and say, okay, Calvin, where did you come from? Tell me about your past. It was always sort of the here and now that we ended up finding ourselves in, and this show is a gift to me because it gives me a chance to say, okay, what is the story behind the story? And with your story, Calvin, I've been just blown away with the story behind the story, and we're gonna get a chance to talk about that. But people will enjoy hearing the massive amount of experience from around the world that you bring into your work at Naomi's. But hey, before we go any further, where are you sitting right now?
I'm sitting in my bed and breakfast in Orange Grove, just north of Gulfport off of Canal Road.
Yeah, so that's something you started after Hurricane Katrina. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so of course we were downtown Gulfport. Katrina washed us north, as everybody did at that time. We were out here looking for someplace to replace. I had a restaurant in the Markham building. I had a house on 2nd Street behind Grass Lawn, and I had my business on 30th Avenue, and they were all destroyed in the storm. So came out looking for I was looking for a place to live and a place to move my catering business to. And we came across this old house out here in the country. Now, this house was moved here in 1972. So this isn't the original location of it. It was built in 1865. And it's an old Victorian, sits on 3 acres of property, 6 bedrooms. And so immediately, as soon as I saw it, and it had a building in the back that we could put our catering business in. So I fell in love with it the minute I saw it, but it was in pretty bad shape. So we renovated the first floor, moved in. And then when the economy busted in 2009, 2010, business just went downhill. It was a horrible time for everybody. And I had this big mortgage I had to pay. So I started renting out rooms on Airbnb upstairs. I had 2 rooms that I fixed up and rented on Airbnb. And it became so successful that I renovated another room and added that, renovated another room and added that, then went downstairs and took a study, renovated that, put in an extra bathroom. So really started out as a way just to pay the mortgage. And then after things picked back up and things got back on track, I've just continued with it. And now I live in like one little corner of the house and rent the rest of it out on Airbnb.
That's so interesting.
It wasn't anything I planned. It wasn't anything I planned.
Well, I'm not surprised. First of all, you're innovative, and you've proven that you can turn on a dime and find a way to survive. I mean, listen, after Katrina, we all sort of learned what it was like to turn on the dime, didn't we, buddy?
Absolutely. And that whole, my whole life has been broken up into segments, and the whole Katrina experience is one whole segment, as everybody else on the coast does. There's pre-Katrina and there's post-Katrina. And you sit around and you talk about things and you go, well, that was before the storm. Well, now that we had those 3 storms back to back 2 years ago, I have to specify that I'm talking about Katrina. But before that, we just thought everything was, well, before the storm, or we used to have, I don't have that anymore. That was before the storm. So yeah, that storm that storm was a big life changer, and it wasn't all bad. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
It brought me out here. It got me started on this whole new line of business, and it made a big difference in everything, really. I was in a little bitty ratty building down on 30th Avenue that looked like a stiff wind would blow it over, and wondering how I was ever going to expand. And now I live and work, operate out of the same place out here. So
Haley Barber used to always say that there was a Chinese symbol that looked like a yin yang symbol, that it said that the same word for opportunity was the same word for disaster. And because he always wanted to point out that in a disaster like Katrina, if we will take a step back and see it for what it is, it does create opportunity. And the truth is, we really didn't have any other way to look at it, because if you don't see the opportunity and you're accepting your demise. And he was trying to, reassure people that it will take us time, but we will come out of this better and more resilient, and we will renew ourselves. And for the most part, that's exactly what has happened, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I look back at it now, and I really can't remember how bad it was, because every day you got up, you put one foot in front of the other. And if you remember correctly, like your first day, you went into survival mode. Okay, where am I going to get food and water today? Where am I going to get shelter today? The next day, okay, I found a source for water. I found a source for a little bit of food to get me through today. I've got shelter for today. And you just got through every day, one day at a time. And then suddenly one day I look up and it's 17 years later. I'm in this big, beautiful house on 3 acres of property. And I just renovated the house kitchen, and and everything is going smooth and everything is great. And I don't know when that happened, but it happened one day at a time. By just getting up and putting your one foot in front of the other. I want to tell you a really quick story where I learned this. When I was in high school, I worked at A&P grocery store as a stock clerk and a cashier. And on really busy days like holidays or first of the month when the military got paid, you would be you'd be standing at your checkout line, and sometimes the line would get down the aisles. You would have 30, 40 people in line. And it would just give you this sense of anxiety. And I learned very quickly, don't look up. Just look at the guy or the lady right in front of you. Check her out. Maybe the second lady in line. But if you look down that line, you'll panic. So all I did was just deal with the person in front of me. And that's how I kept from just overreacting to it or let it create anxiety. And that's exactly what I did with Katrina. We just got up every day. I was staying at my parents' house. I had a computer that I worked on on a card table in their living room. And just every day it got a little bit better.
That's such a great way to look at it. And if I look back on my story, it was very similar to that. I had an incredible experience 2 days after Katrina. The first day after Katrina, I could talk to the Sun Herald with a satellite phone, but I couldn't get to the Sun Herald. The bridge was compromised, and I tried to get a ride with the policeman, and he didn't understand who I was. He tried to arrest me. It was just my neighborhood was destroyed. It was just an apocalyptic situation. I finally made my way to the Sun Herald. But I'll tell you the quick experience I had when we get on the other side. We're having a conversation with Chef Calvin Coleman. He owns Naomi's Catering. And I've known him for so many years. It's amazing to have people stand the test of time, and Calvin has certainly done that. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue the conversation. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. We're visiting with my friend Chef Calvin Coleman. He owns Naomi's Catering. And when we went to break, he was sharing the way he made it through Katrina was he learned a lesson when he worked at A&P as a young man, that don't look at the long line of people waiting to check out. Just look at the person in front of you, maybe the next person over, but don't look any further than that, because you'll freak out. You'll get a little bit stressed out understanding how many people are waiting. And, that's a great lesson, really, to deploy after a storm. You can't take everything in. If you do, you will be completely overwhelmed by it. But the fact that you can deal with the situation in front of you in this moment, you'll find the inspiration to be able to move on. I was about to tell you, 2 days after the storm, I walked out on a pile of debris in my backyard, boats and homes and piers, and I saw this. I told this story before. I wrote about it, actually. I saw a squirrel run across the ground, and I wondered, gosh, how did that squirrel survive? And then I got to looking closer and realized that almost the entire back of its hide was not there. It's just red meat. But it was still alive, and it went to the tree, tried to go up the tree. And it occurred to me that it's probably not going to live, that it had really been severely injured. And to me, it was a little bit of divine intervention in that moment. It was like, wait a minute, here's this squirrel sent me this powerful lesson. We were almost killed by the storm, and everyone in my family survived. And we had we had each other, we had our lives, and while so much had been destroyed, we would get through this. And after that, I walked inside. My wife and I hugged each other, and we cried, and we never looked back. We just went on. And, the Sun Herald played its role in the community. Ann had, in my family, 9 of 11 homes were destroyed. And we had, everybody had the same story. And in every story, in every family, there was incredible inspiration about resiliency. We saw it every day for months, for years following the storm. And that kept us all kind of going, didn't it, Calvin?
And remember what a sense of camaraderie that developed after the storm. Democrats, Republicans, across ethical boundaries, across, everything. It didn't matter who you were, what group you belonged to. The sense of camaraderie was awesome. And I don't think any one of us would have gotten through that had it not been that sense of neighbor, and sense of community that we developed. Now, we all got kind of aggravated at New Orleans because they got all the attention, but the coast pulled itself up by its bootstraps, and it was just, it is such a story that we were the land between the masses, or the mass between the two cities. But it was just a phenomenal story. And of course, it is just one thing in our lives that happened that we overcame. But it was such a lesson because, you hear all your life when you're up on a Ferris wheel or when you're zip lining, don't look down. And that's basically the way you get through anything, is you just focus on what's right in front of you. Do the next right thing, put one foot in front of the other. I will say this, my father and I have always had a pretty decent relationship. But he was a different kind of person than me. He had different interests, and we were always at odds because he was a sportsman, and so I never really felt like my father ever really appreciated the work that I did, and because he was a hands-on, manly man. And I remember getting up every day at his house at 5 o'clock in the morning to go in. We had a contract with Mississippi Power to serve all those thousands of workers that were here to get our power back on. And I got up every day, and we worked 16, 18-hour days. And there was one particular day that I got up, and I was hurting so bad, and I just sat there wondering how I was going to get up out of that bed. I just didn't know. And my dad came in there with a cup of coffee, sat down, handed me that cup of coffee, and said, you know, you can just do what you can do, get up and just keep moving. And that's what I did. I mean, I just got up, and that was another thing came out of the storm. After that, my father and I were so close. We spoke every single solitary day. I mean, it was unbelievable, but a lot of good stuff came out of that storm.
You know, and one of the lessons that I mentioned on this lesson of after Katrina, one of the lessons, and you just told it just then, what I said is that before the storm, we always felt like we were working hard. You know, we felt like we were on the edge, you know, that we could, you know, we found an understanding. We thought we found an understanding of what our limits were. But after Katrina, we came to appreciate that we had no idea what we were capable of doing. You know, that the human spirit and our tenacity and our resilience within us would take us to a level of work and hours in the day that we never thought was possible. And what we learned about ourselves and what we learned about the people around us is something we kind of still carry with us today, that what's in the heart and soul of us is the reason why this is such a wonderful place to visit, that when the going gets tough, and certainly Katrina was an equal opportunity destroyer, we find out the character of our people. And man, that we've got it, don't we?
Absolutely. And I just want to tell you one more thing about that. And of course, we don't want to make the whole show about Katrina, but when Katrina hit, and I was president of the local restaurant association at the time. And all of us that were in the restaurant association, there was only about 6 or 7 of us that were major caterers on the coast that had been around for any length of time. And we were just devastated. The restaurant industry was devastated. The bar industry was devastated. The catering industry was devastated. Everybody was devastated. But Mississippi Power Company was bringing in all these outside contractors from outside of the state to come in and serve these contract workers. They had 11,000, 12,000 contract workers staged everywhere all over the Gulf Coast, and these people had to be fed and housed. So about a week after the storm, I had been doing a lot of work for Anthony Topazzi, who is just one of my mentors. This man was just a powerhouse. So about a week afterwards, I called Anthony. And of course, you know, we both had C-Spire phones, and C-Spire was the only cell service you could get at the time, or that worked at the time. So I called Anthony and I said, Anthony, listen, we've got all these outside people coming in from outside of the state. I can get you all these restaurateurs, all these caterers. We can serve these people if you'll just give us a chance. And he said, okay, so how many people can you do at a time? I've got 13,000 men that need to be fed 3 meals a day. And I said, well, let me get a group together and I'll get back to you. So I started making phone calls. Anybody that I could reach, I said, hey, listen, do you guys want to get together? We were previously competitors. These are people that we competed against, that I competed with every single solitary day for catering on the coast or for jobs on the coast. But we also knew each other in the restaurant association. So we all got together and formed this co-op, basically. And there was about 7 of us. And it didn't matter if you had a car that had a trunk, if you had a chafing dish, if you had a grill, we all got together. And my church, St. Joseph's, let us use their kitchen. And we all moved up there. And that parking lot looked like some kind of Baptist convention out there with all the grills and the hot boxes and the crock pots. And we served 5,000 men a day together. Previously, we weren't friends, we were acquaintances, but we were competitors. And now here we are, we're all working together to make this happen. And I'm going to tell you what, we still have that contract with Mississippi Power Company today. There's 3 of us still left. I know you know Richard Chenoweth. from Scranton's. Richard is one of them. Scott Weinberg from
Yes.
Fly In. There's a whole group of us. There's still 3 of us are still doing that Forever Storm. So we learned something from that, and we came together, and we're all still together even today when we are still. Scott's not still in the business, but Richard and I are still competitors, but we're very, very close friends, and we still work together when we have to.
That's such a great story.
That kind of thing.
I agree. And you mentioned Anthony DePazzi. He was my dear friend and partner in the recovery effort. We were on the governor's commission together. We worked so closely together, and for him to have to die with ALS, just such a sad story. In fact, I'm going to have in the relative future, I'm going to have a show just dedicated to Anthony, and bring George Schlogel and Jerry St. Pay and a few others, and just tell his story, because he was a bull in the china shop in the wake of Katrina, and that's what we needed. He was chairman of the infrastructure committee, and the work that he did was so important to our recovery. It really was. Hey, listen, you have been all over the world. I look at your background. It's truly incredible. Italy and France and Great Britain and Germany. You've been all over the United States. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about your food and beverage career and how did you decide to do this, and the accumulation of all these experiences land you in coastal Mississippi with Naomi. I don't really know how you had time to do all those things, given how long you've been up and running here in Mississippi. But it's a fascinating story, and we'll tell some parts of it here when we come back with Calvin Coleman from Naomi's. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. I have my friend Chef Calvin Coleman from Naomi's Catering. We've seen each other in so many iterations of our lives over so many years, and it's great to be able to have a conversation with him and get caught up. But gosh, you think about working with presidential visits and White House advance teams and your travels around the country, you travel around the world. When in 1981, when you started at the Scenic Hills Country Club in Pensacola, you could have had no imagination that would start a journey that would unleash, this incredible experience for you. I mean, really, you didn't have any idea, did you?
Absolutely none. And Naomi's is named after my mother. My mother was Naomi. She started the business. So when I left home, I'm from the Gulf Coast. I was born and raised right out here in Orange Grove. I live exactly 2 miles from the house I was born and raised in. So my mother raised 7 kids, so of course she knew how to cook for a group. I left and went to college after graduating from at Harrison Central, and after that, my mother took a cake decorating course down for Wilton cake decorating course. She and a friend of hers decided they were going to do cakes, and they started doing cakes out of our house. I'm gone. None of this happened while I was in that house. It's really funny that our lives paralleled this way, because she got into the cake business. Meanwhile, I moved around, going to different schools. That's a whole different story. But I wound up working at Scenic Hills Country Club. Started my food and beverage career there, and so meanwhile, my mother was developing this business in Gulfport, and eventually she opened a place in Gulfport that sold cake decorating, candy making supplies, and she did custom cakes. And then started doing a little catering on the side, and her business developed. Meanwhile, I'm going to college, trying to get a degree, trying to be something. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a speech writer, a motivational speaker. So I'm going through the whole trying to get a communications degree. But meanwhile, I'm still working in food and beverage. I wound up in St. Louis through a series of events following a boss. And when I graduated from University of West Florida, I went to St. Louis thinking that I would just go ahead and work for this boss on the St. Louis riverfront on a permanently docked cruise ship called the SS Admiral. And while I was up there, I was going to try to be looking for a job in the communications field, trying to do what I wanted to do. And I just never did enjoy the work. The communications work, working in offices, it was just crazy. So I was still working weekends in food and beverage. And finally, I just quit my regular job and went back into this full time. So I got hooked up with, through all those series of events, I met different people And I was always looking for the next best thing. I never kept a job for more than a year. I mean, I would work somewhere until I got bored with it, and then I would move on. But I met a man named Jimmy Rittenberg, who was the general manager of a company called JR Management that managed Mike Ditka's restaurant in Chicago. And he also had the management contract on the Soldiers Field, and all the events there. Well, he was opening a place in St. Louis for Whitey Herzog, who was with the Cardinal baseball team. So I went to work for him, working at Whitey Herzog's place, and met all the celebrities and all the people that came through there. That place didn't last very long, so Jimmy didn't want to lose me, so he moved me to Chicago, where I went to work for Coach Ditka. And after, I even spent about 3 months living in Coach Ditka's coach house as his personal chef. And then from there, I went to work for the Hilton Corporation, and that's where I got moved around a lot, was working for the Hilton Corporation, and started training in the banquet department, training people, going to open new hotels or refurbished hotels. Planet Hollywood, J.R. Rittenberg also managed all the new Planet Hollywoods, if you remember back when they started.
Yeah,
and then
big
started
deal.
Traveling around with them, opening. That's how I wound up working in all those places in Europe. Was every time they opened a new Planet Hollywood, they sent a team out to do all the training and the hiring. And so while I was there, I would go and do what's called a stage, where you go and work for free for a chef that you wanted to learn something from. So meanwhile, while I'm trying to set up Planet Hollywoods or Hilton Corporation banquet departments, I would be staging on weekends for these French chefs and these French restaurants or Italian, or it was amazing. And every opportunity I got to learn something new, I would do that. And so that's how I wound up moving around so much. But I took every opportunity I could to learn while I was there. So,
hey, what's interesting about your story, talking about learning from other chefs, have you seen the Hulu series, The Bear?
Yes. And let me tell you something, that is so true to life. Anthony Bourdain is also one of my big mentors, and I had the opportunity to meet him on several different occasions.
I admired him. What a wordsmith he was.
Kitchen Confidential.
Yes.
That is so true to the kitchen life. You work next to these fantastic chefs, but everyone around you is just a bunch of felons, and, drug addiction, alcoholism, crime. I mean, the kitchens are just full of those kind of people. But I always took the opportunity to work for these people that I respected and admired, to learn from them. I never went to culinary school. It was all hands-on. But so while I was doing all that, my mother was building her business, and so she had her little place down on 30th Avenue. My dad worked for the Mississippi Power Company and retired after 38 years. And my mother, he wanted to travel. Well, in 1993, they were hit head on by a drunk driver in Pass Christian. My father was not expected to survive the accident, and my mother was hurt pretty badly also. So I get the phone call to come home. They're not expecting Dad to live. So I get on a plane, I come home. I had just started a new job with the Marriott Corporation. And I came home, and my dad survived. My mother survived. But he was going to take about a year of recovery, and my mother was going to have to take care of him. So she wanted to sell the business. Well, the realtor that listed the business said, Miss Naomi, this business will sell so much, you will get so much more for it if it's in operation when we sell it. If you just shut it down, we're going to have to sell it for piecemeal. Well, I was the only one in the family, meanwhile, that had stayed in food and beverage, that worked. All my family had been helping her all these years, but I was the only one that had actually went out and made a career of it. So I was asked by my parents to stay and operate Naomi's until the business sold. And April, I celebrated 29 years, and I've still got this thing for sale if anybody wants it. So I'm still here. So I took the business, and after a year knew that I was going to stay and turn it into more more catering and try to do more of and introduce my own style to it. And you mentioned George Schlogel, Peggy Schlogel, and Susie Seal were two of the people that just kind of took me under their wing. George took me under his wing, and Peggy started walking me around and introducing me to all her friends, catering stuff at her house. And from there, it just kind of took off. So then I became, caterer to the Gulf Coast celebrities and the social scene on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. But that's how I actually came back to the Gulf Coast. I came home because of that, to help my mother sell her business after this tragedy of this accident. And I've just never left, and I've just stayed, and it's been 29 years.
That's incredible. You were always someone we could depend on, whether it would be some official capacity at the Sun Herald or a Knight Foundation meeting that I would host at my house, and more recently, I'm trying to remember the last time we saw each other. I think probably it was at a dinner that Dave Dennis hosted.
Yes.
And I remember that. But, you're just, gosh, man, you have done the time, haven't you?
I have. And let me tell you, you'll very rarely ever see advertisements for Naomi's Catering. I've always operated on a belief that I like attraction rather than promotion. So you mentioned, some of my community work. I try never say no, no matter how little I can give, even if it's just a $100 donation or a charcuterie platter. I try never to say no to any of those requests, and there's a lot of them. I mean, being in business, the emails never stop. But that, I believe, has really been a lot of the success. I mean, we go in and we give good service, we give good food, but the community service has always been probably what gives me the most sense of satisfaction, is to be able to do that. And I have met a lot of great people through some of that service work also. Service work is really what it's all about, to tell you the truth, because I have everything I have out of sheer luck. I get people. I had a man call me today wanting to talk to me about opening a restaurant. Go ahead.
Let's do this. We'll pick up right there. A man called you about opening a restaurant, but we'll talk more about the community work and where's Naomi's today as we continue our conversation with my friend Chef Calvin Coleman from Naomi's Catering. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. I have my friend, the Chef Calvin Coleman of Naomi's Catering. And boy, in that last segment, we got to hear the evolution of his career and this business his mother started. And what he agreed to do is just sort of shepherd it until it is sold. And here we are some 29 years later, and they're still rocking and rolling, and he's coming to us from a bed and breakfast home that evolved after Hurricane Katrina. But again, people find a way to innovate, and Calvin has done that. You mentioned before we went to break, someone had called you about maybe starting a restaurant. Finish that story.
Well, the point of the story was that I've been doing this for 29 years, and I couldn't tell you how. So I get people that call me all the time that want to say, and I'll mentor people the best I can, but it's all luck for me. I have the most horrible imposter syndrome, because this guy's trying to ask me, what did you do? Guide me, lead me. I'm like, dude, let me tell you something. I can't tell you why Naomi is a success. I couldn't tell you that. I don't know. I get up every day and I do what I need to do to make the business work. I give fair prices. I never say no to a request for community service. And, I can't tell you why it's worked. It just has. So for someone to say, hey, come into Gulf Coast Community College and talk to the culinary students and tell them what you've done to succeed in the catering business, I just go, I have no idea. I have no idea.
Well, but the truth is, you actually have an idea. And in a way, you wanted to be a motivational speaker when you started. You've actually become that, by sharing your unique story, the way you connect with the community, where the way you get the basics of what you do down, the catering business down, and then you let the relationship building and the community commitment sort of put the exclamation point on it all. But that's why it's worked. It's a combination of you and your charisma and your ability to connect and your relationship building and running a smart business and being innovative along the way and pleasing people. All that comes together, and with your personality, when you do speak to a class, I bet people are sit up on the edge of their seat.
They tell me that they enjoy it. Don't get me wrong, by the way, the people I work with, my staff, and I hate to say my staff like I own them. I tell them every day, we are partners in this business. We pay a living wage. I make sure that people have a life outside of this business. I don't, but they have a life outside of this business. And so we take care of the people who take care of us. And that, I think, it's been our employees that have actually made Naomi's Catering. It's not me. I'm going to tell you, Ricky, I get up every day in a different mood and a different personality. One of the reasons it was hardest to schedule this is I'm going, well, what personality am I going to wake up in on Tuesday?
But it has been successful, and it's funny because again, it may be that we connected along the way through official capacities as publisher of the Sun Herald, but our paths cross often in the community work that I was doing. That whatever it might be, even before Katrina. That if I went to an important chamber event, or I went to an important, certainly after the storm, the Gulf Coast Business Council, or something involving the governor, you would just appear. You just appeared in all these iterations and dimensions, and you were just kind of always there. And man, that takes a lot of effort to be someone who's ubiquitous.
Like I said, I just get up every day and do the best I can. And yeah, I show up in a lot of places. 2 weekends ago, we were in New Orleans doing a book launch for a client that has a house here, but her daughter wrote a book, and she was doing a book launch in New Orleans, and she asked us to come over there to the Garden District. And I'm over there catering this, and I look up, and there's Kara Pichu and her husband. Do you know Kara?
Yes.
So there's Kara Pichu and her husband. They walk in the door, and I'm thinking, now, why do I know these people? And I know Kara very, very well. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and, we're 100 miles away from where we're supposed to be. And that was her, basically, her reaction is there anywhere you won't go? And I said, no, not really.
And, as the former president and publisher of the Times-Picayune and NOLA.com, I can appreciate the world that you're going into over there as it relates to the culinary experience. And, it's quite a compliment to be there in the Garden District representing your craft.
When we get requests to go there, and it happens about once or twice a year, because we have clients that live over here and live in New Orleans, I always wonder, why are they choosing us when there's that entire world, that culinary world over there to choose from? But, like I said, people hire who they know. People hire Calvin Coleman. They don't necessarily hire Naomi's Catering. And I know that.
And I can't agree more. And that's, certainly this is why this conversation has been so enlightening. But hey, we're out of time. It's been a pleasure to finally catch up with you, my friend, and get the Calvin we got today. I like the Calvin we got today. And the story behind the story is so fascinating. Congratulations on your years of commitment to the community and how that's been parlayed to build a very successful business. Keep up the great work, my friend.
Thank you very much, Ricky. I enjoyed it.
This has been Chef Calvin Coleman of Naomi's Catering. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed this conversation today. I hope you did too. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.